Hi friends, welcome to or welcome back to the channel Jane Reads. My name is Jeanette and today I am doing a June summary of all my reading in the month of June and what books I've hauled and unhauled. Spoiler alert, I did not haul any books in the month of June. So my TBR started at 130 unread books. I did not add any to that number. I did read 8 books from my physical and Kindle TBR, so that brings my TBR down to 122 books. Overall, in the month of June, I felt like I was having a really slow reading month. I read 11 books, which is the least number of books I've read all year so far. However, I read 4,055 pages, which is actually the most number of pages I have read all year. Basically by 150 pages. So yeah, that's like, wow. And once we get to a couple of the books, especially one in particular, it will make sense why it felt like it was slower reading month to me. But yeah. Okay. So overall, I had 2 rereads and I had an average of 3.6 for my star rating. I had 2 that are recorded as 5 stars. One's actually a 4.5. Then I had 3 4 stars and 6 3 stars. So I had a lot of 3 stars, and because of that one book, that is why it felt like such a slow reading month. Weird, because I didn't have any really good books. At least it didn't feel like it. I mean, I started the month with a really great book, and I ended the month with a really great book. The middle was, Okay, so what did I actually read? I have continued vlogging every single week, so I have weekly vlogs that include my final thoughts for each one of these books, except for the last 2. I am filming this on July the 1st, so the books that I have read on June 29th and 30th are included in next week's vlog. So I'm going to talk about them very briefly in this one, but my full thoughts will be in next week's vlog, which will go up Wednesday, July the 8th. Okay. And regarding those vlogs, I will have each book listed by a number and then the vlog that states which number is included in the final thoughts or in that vlog. Hopefully that's clear. Once you look at the description box, it should hopefully make sense. Okay, so let's start with the very first book I read at the beginning of the month, and that was The Lost Story of Belle by Melanie Dobson. This is a dual timeline story. I buddy read this with Sierra Trotter, and we had such a great time with this book. So we've got 1940 for Belle's timeline, and then we have 2006 where we are following a character named Harper, and Belle is in Pennsylvania. I'm pretty sure. It's been a while. I'm pretty sure she's in Pennsylvania. And then Harper starts out in California, comes to Pennsylvania. She kind of has ties to the community. And then she starts investigating Via, who's Olivia in the story, and kind of learning about her life. And then we're also following Olivia's life. And then there is a third female character as well that we are following from her point of view as well. I'm not going to tell you which timeline she is in, but once she made an appearance, I was like, what? I wasn't expecting that third person, and I was so here for it. There is a character that I absolutely hated in this book, and it was like, what is going to happen? I was so hooked. So because I was buddy reading this with Sierra, we had agreed to a certain number of chapters per day, and it challenged me to stop and wait to make sure I didn't get too far ahead or make sure I caught up to Sierra, because she felt exactly the same way. She just wanted to keep reading, and that is how I felt. This so sucked me into the story. I highly recommend this. Now, I did give it 4.5 stars rather than 5 stars because I felt there could have been a lot more faith within the story than what there was. There's a bit mentioned at the beginning about like God having control of Olivia's life and stuff, but then it seems like it kind of falls off a bit. And I think that could have been a lot stronger. But I highly recommend this story. This was my first book by Melanie Dobson, and I will definitely be picking up more by her. Okay, the next book I finished was Harbor Pointe by Irene Hannon. This is book number 12 in the Hope Harbor series. It is a contemporary romance. This one just released in April. This was my most anticipated release for kind of that spring period of time, and I was so excited to get my hands on it. And so we are following Devin, who is a principal ballerina dancer for New York City, I want to say. And when her sister gets ill, falls ill, gets injured, she comes to Hope Harbor to help her sister. Then we're following a single father who lives in Hope Harbor, who works for the mining company, and his daughter gets involved in a community production that Devin kind of gets involved in as well. And so the daughter meets Devin and then really gets interested in ballet, and kind of the connection forms there. There is also a second storyline going on with a married couple and some challenges going on there. This one deals with a lot of stuff happens in this book, especially with relationships and repairing those relationships. So we've got the relationships of sisters, a husband and wife, parents, and a child. The romance did feel like it was completely based on physical attraction rather than really getting to know the person. So for that aspect, I gave it 4 stars rather than 5 stars. But I was really invested in this community, and we saw community members that we've gotten to know throughout the other books. So we have Father Murphy, Reverend Baker, Charlie from the taco truck, really play key roles and interactions with the characters that we're following in this book. I really enjoyed it. It was so fun to return back to Hope Harbor. Okay, then my reread was The Trial by Robert Whitlow. This is a legal fiction. We are following Mac, who lost his wife and 2 kids a number of years ago, but he's still struggling. At the very beginning of the book, you see him debating suicide. Then he gets a call from a judge about a case that the judge wants him to take on. He agrees to take it on, meet with the client, and then we are following the client who is being accused of manslaughter when a car accident happened and one of the people in the accident died, and now the family is suing the driver of the car, somebody else in the car. I don't remember exactly. And we're following, so there's a lot of the legal aspect, but then we see the guy that is being charged in jail, spending time in jail, and we see him come to Christ through jail. There is also another character that is witnessing to the lawyer that is really struggling, and we're seeing relationship kind of develop there, helping them find God. There's also another character that's very active in the church that Mac was somewhat active in really with his wife, but once his wife and kids died, he really kind of fell away. And there's another member of the church that's really praying for Mac and what he's going through, and can see that there's struggles. Faith is a huge topic in this book. There's a lot going on with the trial as per the book's name, but really it was faith with the story and characters, and like trusting God, knowing that God is there for you and not turning your back on him, and witnessing. And even though things might not turn out the way you expected, they can be used for good. So I really enjoyed that side of it. The trial aspect and kind of what was happening behind the scenes with, like, was this guy really guilty or was somebody setting him up? What's going on? that lost me a little bit because I wasn't really sure what was happening in the background, like who was really responsible. So I gave it 3 stars because I also felt like it was choppy at times and really flipped between scenes, and I had to like, wait, where are we now? What? So yeah, this is a book I am going to pass on and not keep on my shelves. The Sheriff's Surrender by Susan Page Davis. This is book 1 of the Ladies Shooting Club. It is historical fiction set in Idaho, I want to say. I'm pretty sure. Yes, a murder in Fergus, Idaho has the town's women scared. So we see the death of the local sheriff. Was he murdered or was it an accident? And because of things that are happening, the townswomen want to learn to protect themselves. So a shooting club begins where somebody starts teaching the rest of the townswomen how to shoot. Then we have a guy who is being elected as the sheriff. He didn't really want to take the role, but he ends up taking it on. And then he's pulled in, was it a murder for the past sheriff or was it just an accident? Then there are other incidents that happen that leads him to believe maybe it was a murder. And then there's some men that are not very happy with this ladies shooting club. And so we're just following that. I struggled with the dialect of the characters and kind of what was happening exactly. I really like the relationship between the brother and sister, and then the new sheriff and his best friend, and the interaction of the characters, really, even the interaction of the women. But I knew kind of what was going to happen before it happened. It felt so predictable in some areas. So I gave it 3 stars. I do not plan on continuing the series. This book was loaned to me from my mom, so I will be returning it to her. Okay, A Cry from the Dust by Carrie Stuart Parks. This is book 1 of the Gwen Macy series. We are following Gwen Macy, who is a forensic artist, and she is being tasked with sculpting these skulls, faces on skulls, for an exhibit that is happening. And there seems to be a lot of negative interaction between the Mormon group or an anti-Mormon group and the Avenging Angels, and I'm not 100% sure, honestly. There was a lot of character names mentioned and a lot of research that was going on, and so it's set in present day, but the skulls are from the massacre that happened in 1857, and a group of militant Mormons calling themselves the Avenging Angels. 140 people were murdered. The Mountain Meadows Massacre remains controversial to this day, but the truth may be written on the skulls of the victims. But it seems like somebody does not want the story of the skulls revealed. And so then they start targeting this exhibit, and then somebody dies, and then somebody else dies, and then somebody else dies. And it's like, okay, what? Like, who is doing this? Why? And it seems like Gwen is not safe. And then she's, trusting somebody. And as it gets closer to the end, it was like, oh, maybe you can't trust that person. Like, well, if you can't trust them, can you trust them? Like, what? Like, there was a lot of questioning of who could be trusted. What I really enjoyed about this book, I enjoyed the character of Gwen. I really enjoyed her best friend, Beth. And how she was, I don't even know what her background was exactly, but she was Gwen's best friend and wanted to help Gwen. And she asked if she could be her Robin to Gwen's Batman. And it was fun that way. But Gwen also is going through a separation with her husband, has a 14-year-old daughter, and a lot of things kind of get in play with that because she's being pulled in multiple directions and stuff. So this is book 1 of the series. I do plan on continuing the series. However, I gave this book 3 stars because I struggle with some of it. I don't know a lot of the Mormon church history. I didn't know about this massacre that happened. There's a lot of names mentioned and a lot of research talked about, and really kind of what's true, then making up stories, or they're sharing the truth. Like they were talking about making up history and stuff to kind of throw off for some of the bad guys and stuff. So I'm like, because I don't know a lot of the information, I don't know what of this was true and what was not. And if it was just the characters and just like the mystery was going on, I would have been fully fine with it. But with all the extra research and the extra character names that were mentioned, just like thrown out there kind of thing, I was like, wait, what? Like who? What? So yeah. So for me, this was a 3-star. However, I do plan on continuing the series, so I'm going to keep this on my shelf for right now. Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. This is why it felt like it was a slow reading month. This took me 2 weeks to read because I had an audio and physical, so I was switching back and forth. And wow, classic. I've read it. I do not plan on reading it again. I will be passing this copy on. I liked the way it started. I totally understood what was happening when it started, what was going on with Pip, kind of the situation he was in. Then as things kind of progressed, it was like, wait, what? Where are we now? What? And then different scenes, I'm like, I don't understand. What was the point of that? Or why would you do that? And then I started getting really annoyed with Pip because I didn't like the way he was treating Uncle Joe and what was going on there. Then we get closer to the end, and he starts realizing that maybe he hasn't treated Uncle Joe right and needs to rectify that relationship, and starts like trying to repair it. And again, I'm like, okay, I'm on board for this. I like this. And yeah, so I was like, okay. So overall, I gave this book 3 stars. We definitely see character growth of Pip, from who he is at the beginning, kind of the downfall a little bit of him, and then kind of, really improving at the end. I'm not really sure what job he does at the end. Wasn't really following that storyline. And then, second of all, there's some kind of weird side characters mentioned and the way they interacted. I'm like, I don't know. So this is a 3-star read. As I said, I will be passing it on. What I Promise You by Liz Tolsma. This is book 2 of the Echoes of the Past series. However, this is a series where the books do not connect to each other. They just have the same theme. So you could read this one out of order if this story kind of intrigues you more than book 1 or book 3. I don't know. I haven't read book 3 yet, so I don't know. But book 1 to book 2 do not actually connect with characters or anything. So we've got a dual timeline in 1942 France, where we are following Naomi/Helene. Her name gets changed. She is a young pregnant woman with her husband, and her husband are Jewish, so they get taken to a camp, and then Naomi/Helene gets taken to a maternity home. And so she starts working with other pregnant women and helping kind of protect some children as well, not knowing what is happening with her husband. Then in the 2022 timeline, we are following Caitlin, who is a recent college grad who is looking to go to the mission field. So she has gone over to Spain for some missionary training. She has recently experienced a big loss in the last year and kind of really dealing with that. And when she's in Spain, she is so close to France. So her and a couple friends she's made at the school in Spain go over to France to research for her grandfather, who is originally from France, and kind of get some background information for him. And as we're reading, we're finding out kind of possible connections between the 1942 and the 2022 timeline. But then, so we really have the 2 main perspectives. But then there's a third perspective thrown in there. And that third perspective is told from first person. And I had no idea who that third person was, because the other 2 are both told in third person. And so when it switches to that third person's perspective, that's told in first person. I'm like, okay, well, as we get more and more further into the story and it switches back, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's this person. Maybe it's this person. It was not who I thought it was at all. And so that kept me intrigued, but I was really much more invested in the present day timeline than I was in the historical timeline. And that does not happen very often at all. I am much more of a historical reader than a present day reader. So it was like, wait, what? And I think really it was that third first person perspective that really threw me off for this story, because it just took, I had no idea who it was. Wasn't in the same town that the other two storylines are taking place in. I was very confused every time it would flip. Now, I would say the flip to that person's chapters were the shortest chapters throughout the whole book. Like, they might have been 1 or 2 pages, where the other one were normal chapter lengths, like 5 to 10 pages, give or take, right? So it was a very short perspective, but it really took me out, because I spent so much time trying to figure out who is this person and how do they connect now, right? Because it was a different time period as well. And I was like, wait. I mean, it all makes sense at the end, but it really took me out of it. So I'm giving it 4 stars for this one, but I do plan on continuing the series. And then I read my Booktuber recommendation book that was the highest rated votes when I let you vote for the book I was going to read, and that was When the Day Comes by Gabrielle Meyer. This is book 1 of the Timeless series, and I do own this on my Kindle, but I got the physical copy from the library. I also had the audiobook. I was very reluctant to read this book because I am not a fantasy reader at all. Yes, I love dual timeline, but with different people. Whereas this is a time crosser. So we're following Libby in 1775 and 1914. And she basically lives the same day twice, depending on, like, she lives the day in one timeline, she goes to sleep and wakes up that same day in the other timeline, lives the day, goes to sleep, and then it's the next day in her first timeline. And I'm like, the thought of that was just like, wait, what? This is so impossible. And so, yeah, because of that reason, I had no desire to read this series, but people have raved about this series. There are like true followers of the Timeless series. So when Celestia picked this book for my Booktuber rec, I was like, okay, so I put it on the list of the 10 books that could be voted on by the viewers. The votes came in, and this was the most picked book. So I read When the Day Comes by Gabrielle Meyer. Now, I knew I was going to have an issue with this. And this was my issue the whole way through the book. This is the same person living both timelines. And because of that situation, while she's in one timeline, she's thinking about what's happening in her life in the other timeline. So she is never fully present in one timeline. And that drove me insane. And she is also talking to somebody in one of the timelines about her life in the other timeline. And that person is also a time crosser. And that person has also been further into the future than Libby in 1914. So she knows things from the front, like from more present day than they do at that time. And she would be telling stuff about what's happening. Now, it was very clear that they had to be very careful not to change any aspect of history. So in the 1775 timeline, she's in... wow, what's it called? Gettysburg, with the start of the Revolutionary War. Then in the 1914, she's in New York and London, England, I want to say. And so at that, because it's the start of World War I. And at that time, Libby knows what happened with the Revolutionary War, right, from the 1914. She knows what's happened in the past, what happens with the Revolutionary War. And then, but she has to be careful not to do anything to change the outcome of that. And so it's kind of like, right? And like, she also has access to a book all about it in the 1914 timeline. Like, yeah, she's learned about it in school or whatever, but she also has a book where she can learn and look up certain people that she interacts with in the 1775 timeline. And I'm just like, and she was so set on, I don't like one timeline, I'm going to live in the other timeline. She was determined that was going to be the timeline I'm going to live in. And she just wanted to kind of make it up to her 21st birthday where she would have to choose, and she would choose that timeline and kind of totally give up the other timeline. It also bothered me of what happens when they choose one timeline. What happens to them in the other timeline, and how all the people in that other timeline will be affected because of what happens to them. I did not like that aspect. Then we also have marriage happen, and the husband doesn't seem to be a great guy. I mean, he's not a good guy. He basically rapes her because he forces himself on her. Yes, they are married, but that does not give him the right. And it's not like, we know it happens. It is not detailed on page, but you know it happens. And then it's talked about between Libby and somebody else, right? And so then it kind of gets talking about forgiveness, and there's a big faith discussion in this, and really like God's plans. Like, God has plans for your life, and he will use anything like for good, like whatever might seem bad, he has you in his hands. I really, really like that. But what really bothered me was that she couldn't live in one timeline fully present. And then the ending. The ending was way too convenient for me. It was like, yeah, right. Now, again, you have to suspend all belief because time crossing doesn't happen. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't happen. And so you really have to suspend belief. But for things to happen the way it ended, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. So for me, it was a 3-star read. I really enjoyed the writing style. I did really enjoy the writing style. And I was hooked on Libby as a character and what was going on with her in both timelines. So if I was reading them both as 2 separate stories, I would have been perfectly fine. But if it wasn't the same character back and forth, that is really what drove me insane. So at this point in time, I do not know if I will continue the series, but I definitely want to try other writings by Gabrielle Meyer that is like one timeline story. So that's my thoughts. Okay. Where Hope Begins by Catherine West. This would be considered a women's fiction. We are following Savannah, who is a 40-ish woman. She's been married to her husband for 20-ish years. They have a 20-year-old daughter, a 16-year-old son, and they have lost a child at the age of 9. And when the book opens, the first sentence is, "My husband is leaving me." And we find out that stuff has happened with her husband, and now she's starting life anew, basically, and trying to kind of move forward. What is next for her life? This is definitely a forgiveness story, kind of moving past hurts, dealing with grief, because there was a loss of that child that was a few years before. Then we have suicide, like possible suicide attempts. There's a lot of a terminal illness. There's a lot of heavy topics dealt with in this. And really, faith seems to be very important on the, like, getting a Christian counselor for their marriage, for their children, for like kind of dealing with guilt and hurt and kind of all that aspect. But then it didn't seem that important to have a personal relationship with God. So that's where I kind of struggled a bit. I really like to see like how the family kind of moved forward and what was going to happen. I was very intrigued. I was a lot more invested in this book than I really expected to, honestly. Going in, I was like, I don't know about this. Like, I'm not really sure. But I really became hooked. But other than the faith aspect that kind of I struggled with a bit, I also struggled with the constant references to, I need a drink. Now, alcoholism was not huge. Like, they weren't alcoholics in it, but they really used alcohol as a support, kind of a crutch thing, and get me through the next couple hours, right? And so I didn't like that, but like they weren't getting drunk or anything, right? I also really liked kind of watching relationships be repaired and kind of moving forward, because obviously there's a little, like between the husband and wife, there's strain on that relationship and what's going on. But then it's also affected the kids' relationship with their parents, and kind of like, can the family peacefully reconcile, and what's next for them? Will they get together, or do they go their two separate ways? And how are the kids going to deal with that? I really enjoyed that aspect. But then near the end, there is some guardian angel talk that just, I don't know about that, and kind of seeing things that aren't really there, or are they there? I don't know. That just took me out of the story. I really just wanted the relationship, like really the characters' relationships and repairing relationships. That's what I was reading for. So I'm giving it a 3 stars. I'm not going to keep it on my shelves. I will pass it on. But it really did stick with me in some ways. Okay, and the last 2 books, which are the 2 that will be in next week's Wednesday weekly video, that is I Heard the Belle's novella collection. This is 4 novellas. We've got Darlene L. Turner, Helena Semrich, I don't know how to say her last name, Melanie Stevenson, and Sarah Davison. And so this is a Christmas novella collection all around I Heard the Bells. So basically, I Heard the Bells, either the song or bells ringing, was in each novella within this collection. So I thought that was kind of cool. That was kind of the tie-in between all 4 of them. So Darlene's is A Christmas Wedding to Die For, which is an isolated setting mystery that really kept me guessing. This was definitely my favorite of this collection. I gave this one 4 stars. Then we have A Season of Forever by Helena Semrich. I don't know. This is a dual timeline story from 1940 London, so wartime, and 2025 set in Ontario. And I really connected with the present day characters much more than the historical dual time characters. However, I felt like we spent so much time getting to know the historical characters and then the present day that when it wrapped up and connected the 2 storylines together, it was more of a tell what happened than show what happened, and I did not like that. But that's a problem with the novella. Like, I could have spent a lot more time with both timelines to really get to know. So I gave it 3 stars. Then the third one is Falling for You, which is Melanie Stevenson's, which is a fun 2 best friends leave Toronto, go out to Banff for a skiing week before Christmas. And while there, one of them falls and breaks some ribs, so then kind of gets stuck, can't ski, gets stuck in the hotel. But she meets a cute doctor, and a really nice doctor. And a relationship kind of, or a friendship, possible relationship starts forming. But then there's kind of their real life at home in Toronto, what's going to happen. This was a really fun story. I just, again, novella, I wanted to know like what was going to happen. Like, I would have liked at least an epilogue of like a year later or something, right? So I gave it 3 stars. And the 4th story is Merry Christmas, Mr. Potter by Sarah Davison. And this is 2 exes kind of reconnecting as the lead roles in a local production of It's a Wonderful Life. And they have acted together before, but then they broke up and both left town. And now they're both back in town and have to play opposite each other. And at the beginning, it's very awkward. Neither one really wants to interact with the other. But then something happens, and can they reconnect? And it felt like the feelings just changed on a dime. Like all of a sudden we go from they can't stand each other to now they're interested in each other and their friendship's back. It was like, wait, what? So yeah, I gave it 3 stars. So overall, I gave the novella collection 3 stars. But I'm also not a huge novella person because, as I said, I always want more of the story. I don't like short stories. Okay, and the last book is Meant to Be Mine by Becky Wade. This is book 2 in the Porter family series. It is a contemporary romance set in Texas, and we are following Ty Porter, who we briefly met in book 1 because he's the brother of Bo Porter, which is the main character from book 1. And then we've got Celia, and the two of them get married in Vegas on a whim. And then the morning after, one of them has regrets and they go their separate ways. And then 5 years later, they reconnect. And what's going to happen? They're still married. And so how do they deal with that? Do they proceed with the divorce now and kind of move on to possibly have other relationships, or can they repair their relationship? The thing that I really enjoy the most about this story, yes, I love the characters and the way they interact and the people around them, but I also really enjoy the faith discussions and digging into the Bible and learning about forgiveness. When they initially got married in 5 years prior, at the very beginning of the book, neither one of them are Christians. This happens. They had grown up church, but then they fell away. This happened 5 years later. They learn something, and how are they going to deal with that? And then they start going back to church and really digging into the Bible to see what God says about forgiveness. And I really, really enjoyed that aspect. This was my 3rd time reading this story, and I just love it just as much as I did the 1st and 2nd time around. So I gave it 5 stars. So as I said, I started the month really well with a great book, which I really enjoyed, which was The Lost Story of Belle. And then I ended the book with Meant to Be Mine by Becky Wade. So these are definitely my 2 favorites of the month. I do not physically own Meant to Be Mine, but these are definitely my 2 favorites of the month. If I have to pick a new favorite out of these 2 reads for the month, it would have to go to The Lost Story of Belle because Meant to Be Mine is a reread. So for a new favorite, it would need to be this one. So please tell me what your favorite book of the month of June was. I would love to chat in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video today, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.